One of the great joys of the Mediterranean countryside is the music of the bells that the sheep and goats wear round their necks. This is southern Greece, not far from Delphi. Here they traditionally select a range of bells for the flock that will not only help the shepherd locate individual animals, but also combine to make this beautiful melody. Sheep and goats wear bells of different shapes, although the rule is not followed so rigidly these days. The town of Amfissa has long been the centre of bell making for the whole of Greece, though the numbers of craftsmen have dwindled from 100 to perhaps half a dozen. Master craftsman Elias Tsingas allowed us to see the whole process, first showing us a goat bell which is made from a single sheet of iron. He gives it some preparatory shaping on the anvil while it's still cold, and then puts it in the coal-fired furnace for a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, the apprentice is shaping bell clappers. When the metal is red hot, the two sides can be folded together and evened up, and ears can be fashioned to give a characteristic shape. The proportions vary according to the region where the bell will be used. Bells from this workshop go down to the Peloponnese and up to the very northern parts of Greece. Sheep bells are formed quite differently. 3 or 4 sheets of iron are riveted together through one corner before being heated in the furnace. Being a thicker mass, this takes a little longer than a single sheet, but they retain their heat longer too, which is important for this method, which really requires 2 men working together to do properly. The decline in the numbers of bell makers seems to be due to several factors. Fewer sheep, which in turn is partly because few youngsters want the lonely life of a mountain shepherd. And also perhaps the cost of bells made in this traditional way, and they insist it couldn't be done by machine. But we were glad to see that Master Elias has the apprentice, Chris, to teach, and who knows, one day he may be just as skillful. The riveted corner is cut off and the sheets go back in the furnace again. When they come out, they can be carefully separated. Usually bells are made in batches, a dozen or more going through each stage at a time. It was a great help to us that Master Elias demonstrated on single bells, as his workshop was very hot and fumy. The inner bell is still hot enough to allow a bit more shaping, and the folds from the earlier working can be flattened out. After cooling, the corners are trimmed off on the guillotine, and then it's back to the furnace yet again for another minute and a half. Chris is now powdering glass for a later stage of the process. A bit more shaping on the front of the furnace completes the hot working, with the sides being brought close together. When it's cooled, the sides are riveted together. They say this is better than brazing or soldering, which would affect the tone of the bell. The goat bells are riveted in just the same way. Final shaping of the sheep bells is done on the so-called cock anvil. This gives the bell a bit more roundness. From now on, both types of bell are worked in the same way. Holes are punched through the top. Then a staple-shaped loop is fitted. One leg of this staple is longer than the other and is curved round inside to make a hook from which the clapper will hang. The next stage is to dip the outside of the bell in a mud-like suspension of a copper ore and salt. Then this is dried on in the furnace. The inside is treated differently. The glass which Chris has been powdering, mixed with borax as a flux and a few pieces of copper, are put inside, and again it's back to the furnace for these coatings to be fused to the metal. That very useful tool is made out of rushes, dipped in water now and again. It took about 2.5 minutes for the glass to melt, and then the copper glaze is spread round the inside evenly by rocking and rotating the bell with the tongs, taking another couple of minutes. All this means that the bell is now a single resonant structure which won't go rusty. It's all very hot and thirsty work. The fumes from the furnace can't be very healthy. Elias Tsingas looked to us a very hard-working man, and none too well. It seems as if Chris makes all the clappers, rounding off the bottom end and thinning down the top, which will later be bent into a hook. The next stage is to knock off the scale from the firing, and 2 or 3 minutes work is put into this, and hammering the sides until the tone is judged to be just right. The shepherds used to come and join in this judgment, choosing exactly the tone they wanted to make a melody they liked. After all, they have to live with it day after day. It's important to realise that this is not just a job, it's a real craft, and both bellmaker and shepherd take a great pride in their ability to contribute an extra element of beauty to their countryside. Finally, the thin end of the clapper is fashioned into a hook, and in this particular workshop they use a hinge of leather to let it swing more freely. But more typically, the clapper would be hung directly from the end of the collar loop. So, thank you, Mr. Tsingas. Efharisto.